One.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first Cabinet meeting of 2021. As always, due to the coronavirus restrictions, we are broadcasting the meeting online, and we are all meeting virtually to comply with COVID rules. Members, if I can just remind you, if you're not speaking, if you put yourself on to mute and then use the hand feature to indicate that you want to speak, and I'll come to you. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. No apologies received.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Have we got any declarations of interest? No? Okay, in which case we'll move on to leaders' announcements. I just want to take a moment or two just to reflect upon where we find ourselves as a borough and, of course, as a country. We're now into the third national lockdown as a result of coronavirus, and our numbers in Telford Wrekin are at an all-time high. They've never been as high as they are now, and those figures will be published later on today. I can't understate the importance of all of our residents to follow the rules, to stay at home, and to be thinking about how they behaved in March, not how they've behaved necessarily since then, but how we all behaved in March when we didn't know what this virus was, when we were told to stay at home and to follow the rules very strictly. Schools, of course, are not in great numbers. Of course, many children are being homeschooled, and I heard a comment yesterday that's really sort of struck a chord with me, which is, for each vaccination that takes place in this country is equivalent to a child going back to school. Because what we do know is that once we get the vulnerable people vaccinated, the risks will decline significantly, which means we can all return to a way of life that we can remember. And that also means, of course, our children going back to school that we all desperately want to see. And I've made a very clear offer to the government and to health partners that we as a council, we will do all that we can. I know this is supported cross-party. We will do all that we can to support you in the rollout of this vaccination. For me, it's probably the biggest and most important task of the government in peacetime. It is literally going to save lives, and we can't have bureaucracy getting in the way. We can't have cultures of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 getting in the way. What we need to be doing is working together, every part of the public sector, every part of the community, all sectors within the economy, to get this vaccination out as quickly as we can, and we all need to do that. And quite frankly, I am frustrated by the speed in which the vaccinations are being rolled out here in Telford Wrekin. We are well below the national average already. We are told that 1 in 4 over 80s have been vaccinated across England, a guesstimate, and this is a frustration of mine. They can't even tell me the data, accurate data, but my guesstimate based upon conversations I've had with health partners is that around 1 in 7 of our over 80s have been vaccinated, and that simply is not good enough. And we need the government, and we need our members of parliament, and we need health authorities here in Telford Wrekin to get a grip of this situation. I think that we should be aiming to get every over 90 vaccinated in the next 10 days. We've got about 1,000 over 90s in Telford Wrekin. For us to vaccinate them over the next 10 days is not too much to ask for. And for us to get to the national average over the next 14 days, because we shouldn't be actually even at the average. But the fact that we have to campaign to be at the average just really does sum it up. So I will make no apology, and I know colleagues will make no apology, that we will be banging on about this every single day in private meetings, in public meetings, to make sure that our residents get the access to this vaccination. And there has to be a degree of cutting red tape. I was told by a GP yesterday that they are not contractually able to vaccinate patients that belong to other GP practices, even if they've got vaccinations available. That is absurd. It's absolutely absurd, and it absolutely has to stop. I was speaking to a family in my ward only yesterday, a 93-year-old who lives almost opposite Mannersley Surgery, who is registered at Dawley Medical Practice. And because she's registered at Dawley Medical Practice, she can't access the vaccinations at Mannersley, even though she can see from her bedroom window people queuing to get into Mannersley who are in their 70s or whatever. Now, this isn't about me saying that those people in their 70s shouldn't get it, but we absolutely need to have some common sense around this agenda. And I think that the way in which the CCG and the STP and the Department for Health are behaving in these early days really isn't good enough. And we all want to join together, I think, in order to make this go faster. And just finally, and I know that there's at least one person on the line that has got knowledge of this, but there can't also be an obsession around GPs doing this. Community pharmacists, people that do flu jabs, should be absolutely mobilised and called up. This is a moment of national importance. It's almost like conscription, really. We should be identifying those people who can do it, calling them up, releasing them from their day jobs to get this effort sorted. As I say, we will absolutely not apologise, and I will not yield to any bullying from people who don't represent Telford Wrekin to telling me to shut up or whatever. We will not do that. Residents have my promise and the promise of this cabinet that we will continue to campaign on their behalf. So that's all I wanted to say about vaccinations and COVID-19. But please do ensure that the rules are followed, and our announcements of the figures later on will be sobering reading for many. Okay, we'll move then to item 5, which is the financial monitoring report, and I know item 6, which is the service and financial planning 2021 to 22 proposals. And I think Councillor Evans is going to take those two reports together.
Leader, may I make a just to remind you, Leader, it's Ian Ross speaking.
Thank you, Ian.
Just as regards item 3, you might want to quickly pick off the approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Oh, forgive me, and I missed that. I apologise. Minutes of the previous meeting. Then they are at page 3 to 8 in your pack. Those have been previously circulated. I'll be happy to move those as a true record. Thank you, Richard. I shall sign them as soon as I'm able to. Thank you, Ian, for reminding me of that. So we'll move on to item 5 and 6. Ray Evans.
Apologies to members, this will be by necessity quite a long presentation. With regard to the mid-year review, this shows a considerable improvement over the report I brought to Cabinet in November. Following decisive action taken by Cabinet members and budget holders across the Council, together with the receipt of some one-off emergency additional funding from the government to cover costs for the pandemic, I can report that the budget for the current year has largely been brought back into balance. However, it must be recognised that there are still many uncertainties in what is a very dynamic environment, and the projected position will without doubt fluctuate. Therefore, work will be ongoing by both the finance team and service managers to update and refine financial projections as additional information becomes available. In total, the current projected year-end budget shortfall is estimated to be around 19.28 million. This includes projected service pressures of around 14.18 million, together with estimated potential shortfall in the council tax and business rates income of 5.10 million. Whilst the Council acknowledges the 17.2 million of Government National Emergency Response funding which it has received, this by no means covers the additional costs which the Council has incurred and which currently amount to an estimated overall shortfall of 2.04 million. It is hoped that the remaining pressure will be offset by the Government's Tax Income Guarantee Scheme, although exact details of this are still awaited. We also retain contingency money against year-end pressures. Proposed changes to the use of budget contingency are laid out in section 5.1, whilst other in-year transfers are listed in section 5.2, and other variations and capital approvals are listed in the appendices. Moving on to the service and financial planning strategy, this sets out the Council's budget proposals for the next 12 months. Once approved by Cabinet, these proposals will be subject to 4 weeks of consultation, and the report will be considered in detail at 3 scrutiny meetings, with the final proposals returning to Cabinet on the 18th of February, and all members will have the opportunity to comment at full Council on the 4th of March. The Council received its provisional funding settlement from the Government on the 17th of December. The settlement announced means that the Council will receive nearly £1 million less funding from the Government next year than in the current year. This is despite increasing demands for many Council services, in particular adult social care services. Whilst the Government said that the Council's core spending power will increase by 3.2%, they are only able to make this assertion based on the assumption that the Council will increase its council tax by a total of 4.99%, which is the maximum permitted for next year. Following the settlement, the Council faces a budget gap next year of over £9.9 million. If the Council increases its council tax by 4.99%, this will raise £3.764 million towards that £9.9 million funding shortfall. The remaining shortfall will be bridged by generating additional income, and making budget savings of £5.9 million, together with the use of one-off balances. Council know well that over the past 10 years, due to significant cuts to the grants provided by this Government, the Council has been forced to make ongoing savings of over £126 million in order to present balanced budgets. This is equivalent to having £700 less per annum to spend on every person living in Telford and Wrekin. Over the same period of time, both the demand for and cost of delivering council services has increased significantly. Additionally, the ongoing costs of the coronavirus pandemic have led to further pressures on the council's budget. The fact that the government strategy has been to shift the responsibility for funding essential council services away from the government's grants and onto local council taxpayers. As a result, after more than a decade of severe financial constraint, Telford and Wrekin Council has already taken significant steps to implement a strategy of generating income from new commercial ventures, like the Council's Build to Rent New Place project and its solar energy farm, which help to fund frontline services. We have developed strong partnerships with our town and parish councils and community groups as we seek new ways to deliver services that we can no longer afford to directly deliver. In addition, we have made significant budget cuts, including the reduction of a workforce by over 1,600 posts. In the face of all these pressures, the Council will now have to find further budget savings and also ask residents to pay more council tax in order to continue to provide the level and quality of services required. We have already made huge budget savings over a number of years, and this year is no exception. Without the 4.99% rise in council tax, we would feel the effects even more. This money is needed to continue to invest in and safeguard existing services delivered by the Council for its residents and businesses. The major part of the rise includes a 3% rise for adult social care precept, which must and will be invested fully into these services. The remaining 1.99% of the increase will raise £1.45 million, which will ensure that the Council doesn't need to consider more extreme saving proposals, such as the introduction of car parking charges, charging for green bins, or closing some of our leisure or libraries facilities. Budget proposals include additional investment of £2.2 million in adult social care, new investments to support crime and antisocial behaviour initiatives, and a capital programme of £200 million. Priority will continue to be given to children's safeguarding. In addition, we are proposing a medium-term capital programme totalling £228 million. Cabinet, there remains a very high level of uncertainty over the future financial sustainability of councils. Once again, this settlement is just for 12 months. This is the third consecutive year that the council has been unable to plan its budget for more than 1 year ahead. Whilst we're not close to needing to issue a Section 114 notice, which would freeze spending on all but essential items, there are many, many uncertainties facing the council in the year ahead and beyond. These include the impact of Brexit, the continuing impact of the pandemic, and potentially significant changes to local government finance system, which have been talked about for many years but continue to be delayed. With this high level of uncertainty, the council remains unable to plan, as I've said before, for more than 1 year, and is forced to limit new ongoing investments and retain as much one-off resources as possible. Cabinet, I'm proud to be able to say that we continue to have the lowest council tax for the services we provide across the whole of the Midlands region. Even after the proposed increase, if no other council increases their council tax, which is extremely unlikely, we would still have one of the lowest council tax levels in the Midlands and still be well below the Midlands average. For the average property in the borough, this increase equals £1.01 extra a week on a household bill. But we do not take that lightly. In the knowledge that many people will be struggling financially, particularly as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, we have put in place a council tax reduction scheme for those residents on lower incomes. Additionally, we are doubling the allocation of our hardship funding to assist those facing the greatest difficulty in paying their council tax. Undoubtedly, there will be tough decisions to take over the next 12 months to make sure that we balance our books. So we continue to lobby government for better funding of vital local services, and we will continue to protect, care and invest in our residents, communities and businesses to make Telford a better borough. Members, you're asked to note the recommendations contained in Section 2 of the mid-year budget review and recommend that full council approves them. You are also asked to approve the proposed service and financial planning strategy set out in this report for consultation and note the items contained in Section 2.2.
Thank you, Councillor Ray Evans. Is that seconded?
Second that, Sean.
Thank you, Richard. I'll come to you first for your comments. If other cabinet members wish to indicate, then please do.
Yeah, I mean, as Ray said, give thanks to the officers and the staff and the short administration in making sure the budget balance and that, you know, despite the massive amount of cuts that we've had to make of £126 million, we continue to deliver services for our residents. And sadly, you know, this council, as you will hear later on in the resident survey, stood up and acted when the pandemic came along on the promises that we would be fully reimbursed, and as Ray said, we're still £2 million short of that. So, you know, this council has done all it can through the pandemic for our residents to commit through services. And if it wasn't for our commercial activities with New Place, the solar farm and other things, we wouldn't be able to be in this position. So, you know, we have to be commercially active because the government's not giving us that funding, and sadly what they are doing is putting the pressure onto local council taxpayers again to try and fund the gaps that they've left councils in. And as you said, there's a lot of councils issuing those notices. Sadly, the one thing that they've never ever sorted is adult social care, which has pressure after pressure after pressure every year, time and time again. And if they'd probably listened to Andy Burnham and made it a national NHS and social care service, we'd probably be in a better place than every year us looking for funding opportunities to try and deliver those care packages and support those people in adult social care. So, you know, well done to everybody at this council for how we are doing this, but the government need to start stepping up to the plate, start funding councils properly, and also deal with the issues of adult social care.
Thank you, Richard. I'll come to Andy and then Lee.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, just echoing Richard's comments and really following on from those. I mean, it really does say something that despite the pressures we're under, we're still managing to invest in adult social care. And I'm asked often by colleagues elsewhere how we're managing to do this. I mean, there's no mystery about this. We're doing it because of the kinds of investments we're making elsewhere. That's leading us to a relatively, and I say relatively, stable financial position compared to other local authorities. We've got an ageing population in Telford now. That we were a new town, but lots of those residents who moved to the town in the 60s and 70s now are getting older, so the demands are increasing. But our adult social care team have really got ahead of the curve in terms of the kinds of initiatives that they've managed to develop. We've got a hospital discharge team, a rapid response team that is really helping in terms of making sure that people get out of hospital or don't go in if they don't need to. That's a magnificent achievement, and is managing to deal with a lot of patients who would otherwise be confined to hospital. And we've also, and this is key as far as I'm concerned, we've got partnerships in the community, both with our other authorities and with our voluntary sector, which enable us to do far more than we would otherwise be able to do alone. I mean, and that's been a characteristic of the way that we've developed our services over the years, and I'm really proud of the way we're continuing to innovate and develop despite the kinds of pressures we're under. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I'll come to Lee and Eileen.
Thank you, leader. Just like to reiterate the thanks to officers. We shouldn't underestimate the pressure that they've been under, particularly the team that are responsible for pulling together this budget. You know, bear in mind that they've been doing sterling work to manage the demand that's been placed upon them by COVID. You know, the response to that, the demand for council tax holidays, administering discretionary business payments, etc. Always hugely impressive. And they once again have produced this budget which demonstrates that we're progressing on solid foundations. I mean, in terms of this, obviously I've got experience previously of presenting budgets to Cabinet and taking them through, and it's a case of everything changes but everything stays the same, really. You know, even before COVID hit, government were always determined to shift the blame or the burden, of paying for services from Whitehall to local council taxpayers, and that's exactly what they intend to do again this time. And I think it's frankly disgusting, given the crisis that we've just been through, some of the pressures that have always dogged us throughout the last 10 years, you know, increasing cost pressures in terms of safeguarding adult social care haven't gone away. They're still there. And we've got no end of other pressures that will come as a result of the impact of COVID on our communities. To the public, just give the document a good read. It's out for consultation, obviously, after today. Give it a good read, because it is textbook in terms of delivering what matters. A local authority determined, committed to delivering what matters most for them, to them, in a fair and balanced way. Basically giving them the deal, saying that we will do what we can as a local authority to deliver what matters most to you. You will have to pay a little bit more for that, but at the same time, we will do what we can in terms of being an efficient council, saving where we can, but also looking for new ways to generate income. And I know that recently that amounts to about £40 million per year in terms of income that we generate to help pay for local services, and an underpinning all of that, an absolute commitment from us that we can stand proud in terms of local authorities across the country actually in being almost certain that we will avoid the very worst financial calamities which will face some local authorities once they come through the other side of this.
Thank you, Lee. Eileen and then Paul.
Thank you, Leader. Just really to reiterate some of the things that have already been said. So firstly, thanks to everybody that's worked on this. I know it's not been an easy task to try and bring the budget to balance. 126 million already cut from the budgets of local authorities in Telford, £700 per adult across the borough, taken from the funding by government, and now they're going to put less funding into the council, basically forcing councils across the country to put council tax up to raise funds that they need for services. It puts us in an impossible situation where council tax has to rise or we have to cut services somewhere, and it's just a situation that shouldn't be happening. We need government to start funding local authorities properly so that the authorities can provide the services that they need to. So that's all I wanted to say, really.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Paul and then David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. This is clearly a terrible situation to be in. Not knowing, as a multi-million-pound business in our town, not knowing our budget for the next 3 years is frightening. And as others have said, it's the officers who have to deal with this issue have kept us in a very, very stable position, and we should praise them for the work that they've done to get us here. But it's like giving some money and taking more money away with one hand, and then the U-turns that have happened in the last few months over the pandemic have been quite frightening for us. I know that if it wasn't for Team Telford, and when I say Team Telford, I mean the voluntary and community sector in our town, who have worked with us to make sure that some of the needs of our community are being met. It's frightening that we have to say that we have to say we are relying on our partners to work with us to ensure that the basic needs of our community are being met. And I'm proud of what Team Telford have done over the last 9 months with this COVID pandemic. And I welcome the report with a heavy heart, because the government is putting the burden yet again on the ordinary people of Telford and Wrekin to pay for what they're refusing to pay for, which is the needs of our most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you, Paul. If I go to David and then Shirley.
Thank you, Leader. Can I also pay tribute to Councillor Evans for her work on this report and steering us through what has been a challenging year in terms of our financial position. Clearly, the government indicated they would give us every support they could, but they failed to do that. And we've seen issues this year about a hold in the budget, which we've had to manage very carefully, and I think we've done very prudently. What alarms me about this is that the government seem to be presenting this in a way that suggests that local councils shouldn't have to increase their council tax, that they've given us enough support to enable us to not increase council tax, but then they've already assumed within their calculations that we will increase our council tax by the level that we're considering today. And quite rightly, we're protecting adult social care services, we're protecting services for children and young people. They're absolutely core in relation to what we do, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But what that means is other services come under increasing pressure year on year. So the question, if you don't want this council tax rise to other parties on the council, is a very simple one. Which libraries are you going to close? Where will you be bringing in parking charges in borough centres? And which other services do you intend to close? Because you cannot have it both ways. You cannot suggest that we don't need to increase our council tax, and that we can retain all of the services that we currently have. We are already going to have to cut some services and make savings next year in order to balance the budget. If we can't increase the council tax by the level that Councillor Evans has indicated, we have to have firm proposals from other parties on the council as to which services they will cut. I want to protect our libraries. I don't want to have parking charges in our borough centres. I don't want to have to charge for other council services. So that's why I am reluctantly inclined, as I'm sure we all are, to support the council tax increase that is being forced upon us by central government.
Thank you, David. Shirley and then Carolyn.
Thank you, Leader. I think this budget shows that we are still prioritising our residents. We are standing by our promises to residents to protect, care and invest, and that has never been needed more than it's actually needed now. We are in the position we are in with our budget because of the last 10 years of amazing financial management. We have managed to get to where we are because of the investments that we have done. The investments that are actually bringing in income, which are protecting the services, our frontline services. There are some people within the council who did not want those services. They voted against the solar farm. They voted against the increasing the money we put into the PIP to bring in. But without those things, if we hadn't have been as maybe some thought of it as taking a risk, but it was a good risk, because I do remember, and I will go back to it, one of our former cabinet members for finance, Councillor Bill McClements, he had a really good thought on debt. There's debt and there's good debt. Good debt is money you invest that you know you will reap the rewards, you will get the income back year on year, and that is what we did. We took that decision. It was the right decision. The income that we have brought in year on year has protected those care packages. It's put the money and investment into our children and young people, and I think that's what people need to remember. I don't feel at the moment that government is providing what is needed. They've already taken, as has been said, £700 from every single family. That 126 million, which we have already had to take, would have been used to support more services to our residents. It would have been able to help more on social care. It would have been able to help more on our children and young people. Our residents will be assured we will continue to always put them first. We are very lucky. We work with our partners. We've got fantastic partners, town and parish councils, community groups, community networks. Their support is so valuable. We can't do this on our own. They have been helping in so many ways, whether that be with the breakfast provision, keeping in touch with all our community during coronavirus. They have, and there are many other things they've done for us. This is a very sound budget, and it's one that in the current circumstances, through the work of our officers and this administration, we should be very, very proud of. The government said they would help us in every which way we can. We will put an arm around you and protect you. As has already been highlighted this morning, we've already got a minimum of 2 million gap. That is not providing everything that they promised. It's an excellent budget. I will support it, and thank you to everybody who's been involved with it.
Thank you, Shirley. I'll move to Carolyn, and then I'll go to the group leaders, opposition leaders. So Carolyn, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think none of us take the decision to raise council tax lightly. We know that that has an impact on residents, and we know that there are lots of residents who will be understandably really worried about this. I think some people who may be listening today may have heard the words essential services and may be thinking, well, why don't we just pull back to those essential services, and then that wouldn't mean such an increase in council tax. And I think we need to just be clear what essential services are. What that means when we talk about essential services is those things that we are legally obliged to deliver. So of course that means safeguarding our vulnerable children and adults. But what it doesn't include is things like parks, open spaces, things that have been an absolute lifeline to people during this pandemic. It doesn't include leisure centres, it doesn't include parking. All the things that we value, all those environmental services that we value, the things that we as councillors probably get the vast majority of our casework around. None of those things would be covered. We would not be able to deliver services in those areas if we did pull back to core services only. And even where we do provide statutory services like the statutory obligation to maintain a highway network, we know that there are various standards of highway maintenance, and you only have to drive across the border to experience a lower standard of highway maintenance. So, you know, it isn't an easy decision to raise council tax, but if we want to keep those services that we value and the standards of services that we value, unfortunately, because of everything that colleagues have said in relation to the core budget coming from government and the additional costs of COVID, we are in that position that we have to take that decision. So again, I do support the budget. You know, I think we have done, the administration and the officers have done really well to ensure that we can continue to provide the things people value, support the most vulnerable, and maintain a balanced budget. And the final thing, I suppose, is just to say that we've also put additional funding into that council tax support. So for those residents who are seeing this increase and who will face increased hardship, that additional support is available. So, you know, do look into that too. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, I'll go to Bill first because he indicated first, then to Nigel. Bill.
Thank you, Leader. I first of all want to take this opportunity to thank all the staff for the supreme effort they've been making while we've had COVID going on. Everyone only ever sees the fact that the bins are being emptied every week and assumes, well, that's it, the council are doing the job, the bins are emptied. But we know it goes a lot further than that. All those frontline staff that have to meet up with vulnerable children, vulnerable adults in adult and children's social services and put their own security on the line at times because to try and do their job. They're our council heroes, really. Never mind councillors, it's the staff that do all this. So a big, big thank you to them. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank all those people in our community that have volunteered through this, picking up prescriptions, delivering groceries, helping out their neighbours. A lot of unsung heroes. I know we've recognised some, but I really want to thank all those people that have gone the extra mile. Sometimes emergencies like this sometimes bring out the worst in people, but my goodness, it brings out the best as well. So thank you to everyone who's done that. With regards to the year we're in and the financial settlement from the government, they promised to cover us for all we needed to spend on COVID. And to be fair, they've gone and given us the lion's share, but again, they've still shortchanged us yet again by £2 million. And people will be thinking, well, where does that 2 million come from? Well, it doesn't come from Mr. Sunak's, you know, never-ending pit of money. It comes from us. You know, we're going to have to pay that, or we're going to have to find savings within a local authority. So we shouldn't be having to find 2 million when a promise was made that all of this would be found. I applaud the finance team and everybody on the authority for making every effort they can to boost the budget. I applaud the direction that the local authorities going in trying to boost up adult and children's social services to provide that care to the most vulnerable in our society. And you haven't got to go far to look at the most vulnerable in our society. I mean, our church in its small way collects food for the Dawley Food Bank, and I've been privileged to be part of drop-in sessions to collect food for a number of food banks along. And when you see the food banks and you see the increasing need that's required, there is an awful lot of hardship going on there, which isn't always being met by either government funding or government grants, and it very often then falls upon us to look after that need. Sometimes it amazes me how an individual like Marcus Rashford, a non-political person, in other words, a nice, normal person, not like us politicians, he comes out and makes this thing about school meals, which I applaud the local authority to go in the extra mile. We were going above and beyond what the government were providing. And it takes that to prick the conscience of a government to say, look, there are so many vulnerable people out there. So in the year that's just ended, I think we've done quite well to balance the budgets to get to where we are. For the year going forward, we're faced by a government yet again who promised to help us with adult social care, but they give us a little bit of money and then take it away. So we're going to end up from money from the government that's less in the new year than what we've had before. And as I've said, with no certainty about what the funding formula will be in the following year, so we can't plan. That's just appalling. I'm an accountant. I know if you can't plan for the future years ahead, it's just bonkers. So we're being forced, and it's so sly, it's so devious. They're saying, right, you can increase your council tax by 5%. They've been even sneakier than that. They've said, all your local parish and town councils, there's no limit on your precepts. So what they're hoping for is that, we'll push services down to the town and parish. They'll put them up above the rate of inflation. We'll do a 5% increase. We'll get the services done and fund it somehow, underhand. And what can the government say? These local authorities are all raising your council tax. Nothing to do with us. Well, it is to do with them. We've got a report coming up later on, and I won't go into it too much, which is the schools funding formula. And to my mind, this is the way that funding for important services should be done. There's a formula for school children based on pupils and with a pupil premium. In other words, the Lib Dems brought in the saying that there should be a deprivation factor brought in so that if you need more money, you do. It's a standard formula that covers the country. We get that money coming in. Finally now it's laid out.
Yeah, I don't want to steal your thunder on the school formula paper. So would you mind?
My point is, with adult and children's social services, it should be funded on a national formula, and the government should jump up for those areas that can't raise it from council tax. Council tax is only sustainable in your local areas where the people can afford to pay the tax. And if you're living in more deprived areas, they can't afford a 5% council tax. More to the point, if it's a low council tax base, the local authority, even if it raised it by 5%, isn't going to get enough money. We don't want to get like America, where the poorer areas have a poorer standard of care, a poorer standard of services. We don't want that. We're more civilised in this country. Sorry if I'm going on too long, but
thanks, Bill.
It really is a passion to me. And thank you for the time that you've given me, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nigel.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'd just like to endorse everything that you said about the vaccination service, but anyway, moving on to the financial management report. Yeah, I'd like to thank Kenley's team for keeping us all out of trouble and for all the hard work that they've done, and indeed all the officers. Obviously, it's a nightmare situation for all of us. And I'd also like to, although I'm probably a lone voice on this meeting, to thank the government for all the support that they've given. And there's obviously going to be more to come. I mean, if we hadn't have had 10 years of austerity to actually get the government's finances back into some form of surplus, well then the country would be in a far worse place, and you wouldn't have had half as much help from the government anyway. On the financial planning point of view, I am a bit concerned that there's only 140,000 being spent, 0.1% of the budget on climate change initiatives, and that paying lip service to the declared climate change emergency is just problems for the future. I know there's more spending going to come in future years, but quite honestly, we need to start getting our act together, or else we're going to spend a long time trying to catch up with other areas. I am concerned also that we seem to be rather over-dependent, or the budget seems to be over-dependent upon the new homes bonus, especially with respect to new place, and I suggest that probably needs looking at, because if we're overly dependent on one particular area, well then, like we've seen, there's changes being made to it, so therefore it's going to have a significant impact in future years. I'd also like to see a bit more clarity as to where the money's coming from for some of the projects, and to have some idea as to how much grant funding and how much is actually being spent by the council. The education funding we're going to come on to later, so I won't delay us any further on that. I mean, the thing is that, you know, these are very, very strange times, as we know, and therefore trying to plan ahead is virtually impossible as things change on a day-by-day basis. Therefore, you know, it's inevitable that that financial planning, although it would be lovely to be able to do it in the medium to long term. Certainly for the next year and possibly even the year after, it's going to be very, very difficult to get any settlement figures for future years. So basically, you know, sort of the budget itself, I'm delighted to see that that we're going to finish the year end on quite a balanced budget, and obviously there'll be more grant funding coming from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Before I bring Ray in to conclude, I'll just make some comments. I think in respect of the big headline here, which will be the thing that most residents will hear and listen to, is around the council tax rise. I think we need to ensure that we level with our residents about that and not hide away from it. I noticed that the leader of the Conservative group didn't mention council tax once, despite the fact that every Conservative council in the country is putting their council tax up by over 4.5%, including the Conservative-controlled Shropshire Council are putting theirs up by 5% too. I think it's really important, just picking up on some of the comments that have been made during this meeting, that this is not money that doesn't go to any particular service area. It goes to safeguard services, and if we don't raise that money, then we'll be in a situation where services have to decline, services have to be cut, or we have to introduce charges elsewhere. And I know that you know, a politician asking residents for thanks is probably the most stupid thing that you can do as a politician. But I do want to just highlight some of the things what make us different here in Telford Wrekin. Most councils in the country raise millions of pounds a year through car park charges. We don't have car park charges here in Telford Wrekin. Many councils across the country raise millions of pounds a year through car park permits for residents. We don't have paid for permits for residents parking. And most councils in the country will charge for things like green waste collections. We don't charge for green waste collections here in Telford Wrekin. And in terms of our council tax, if a resident thinks about every £100 in council tax that they pay a year, then if we were the average council in the Midlands, they would pay an additional £14.50 a year per £100 that they pay to us. If we were the most expensive council in the Midlands, they would pay an additional £33 a year per £100 that they pay us as a council. And that's a really, really important distinction, because we have got the lowest council tax in the whole of the Midlands. And I know that people will not thank us for it, but we have. It's a fact. But not just that. We don't charge for car park charges on the whole. We don't introduce car park green collection fees. And there's a whole raft of things we don't decide to charge for. And on top of that, we have outstanding children's services. Not what I say, it's what Ofsted say. One of only a few councils in the country to have outstanding children's services. One of a very, very small number indeed across the Midlands area. We have outstanding adult services here in Telford Wrekin. Not what I say, it's what the CQC say. One of the only a few handful of councils across the country that have outstanding adult services. Unlike many other councils in the country, we haven't closed a single library. And not just not closed a single library, we've invested in libraries here in Telford and Wrekin. And we haven't privatised our leisure services. That's important as well, because many other councils have sold those off to G4S or Serco, which then increase charges for our residents. So, and I think, you know, there's lots of other things I could highlight. The other thing I would like to highlight is the fact that the government give us £3 million a year to improve our roads. We're spending triple that most years improving our roads. Now, how much money does residents in Telford Wrekin pay in road tax that goes off to Whitehall? We get £3 million back, and we end up having to top it up. So I think there's a whole raft of things there that we residents should take into consideration. The other thing I'd like to highlight is that council tax is also made up of a levy from the Police and Crime Commissioner. Let's see how much he puts his precept up this year, because the government have done exactly the same to police and crime commissioners as they have done to councils. They've announced a big record investment of money for policing, but when you get underneath the detail, every pound of it is made up of a council tax rise, money from residents here in Telford Wrekin. The other proportion of the council tax is the fire service. And guess what, folks? Yes, every pound that the government is saying they are giving fire services, in addition to what they get now, is on the whole made up of the money that council taxpayers pay. So I asked residents to look behind the Trumpism headline that this Boris Johnson government spins out around extra money for public services, because when you scratch, not even on the surface, if you just give it a little bit of a poke, you will see that it all falls apart because it's spin, bluster and fake news. And the final point I'd like to make, just in regards to the council tax, is that unlike many councils, we have protected and invested in our council tax support scheme. If you are a pensioner, on the whole, you are protected if you are on a low income. If you are a low or modest income, you will get discounts. The single person discount also protected, and we're going further, as Councillor Ray Evans quite rightly says, by doubling the hardship fund for those people who are most in need. And just the final point around Nigel's pre-prepared soundbite around climate change. The reality is, Nigel, that we don't just spend money from a climate change fund, we also invest every single day in this agenda. So, for example, the solar farm is a climate change scheme. The Conservatives, including yourself, voted against the creation of the solar farm. It now saves carbon and provides income to the council. Food waste reduces the carbon footprint of our borough. That waste contract opposed by the Conservative group. LED street lighting saves a huge amount of money for this council and also a huge amount of carbon. Guess what? Opposed by the Conservative group. And every pound of money that we go into local nature reserves and green spaces, more local nature reserves, more green spaces than ever before in Telford Wrekin, each and every pound of that investment opposed by the Conservative administration and the Conservative opposition. So let's get away from the sound bites. Let's run a council in the real world rather than a quick tweet, a quick Facebook post or a quick soundbite for the local media. I'd like to go to Councillor Ray Evans to conclude.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, fellow Cabinet members, for your support in this draft document. Thank you, Bill and Nigel, for your general support of the document as well. Remind people that the document is now out for consultation and it will be coming back to Cabinet on the 18th of February.
Thank you. That's been proposed and it's been seconded. All those in favour? I'll take silence as approval. That's everybody then. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Ray, and thanks to the team. I'll now move on to item 7, which is the customer service strategy. I know it says Paul Watling, but actually it's Councillor Richard Overton.
Thank you, Sean. Just get my notes up. I'm pleased to be presenting this report to Cabinet, which sets out our vision for how we want to improve the customer experience across the entire organisation through the launch of a new customer strategy and the accompanying customer contact. Our customers are at the heart of everything we do, and customer service is the first point of contact for the majority of residents when accessing our services or reporting issues. Therefore, we want to ensure that the experience that they have is outstanding. The customer strategy sets out our vision to work with our customers to develop quality services that are accessible to all and to make every contact count. It describes what we want to achieve to realise the vision and how we will deliver it. The strategy builds on existing good practice and highlights recent improvements in customer service, including improved telephone call handling, performance in our contact centre, a reduction in the time taken to respond to complaints across all council directorates, the launch of a new customer insight programme and significantly increased take-up of online services. The strategy sets out how we will continue to modernise our approach, reflecting innovations in technology and, of course, changing customer expectations. We already offer more than 100 services online. We want to make even more information and services available so that digital services become the contact method of choice. But we also recognise that doing things online is not always the best option for everyone. And we also need to continue to provide alternatives for people who are unable to use online services. To achieve our aims, we will need to focus on consistent delivery of our new customer service standards, training and development, etc., which includes involving customers and employees in improving these services, and also review our services to ensure that all barriers are removed and that these services are accessible for all, including working with partners and communities to provide the technology and the skills to help people who wish to move to using online services. We also want to improve our branding and signage so that it's clear which services are provided or funded by the council. And we'll make sure customers get the help they need, even when we have to refer them to another organisation. The strategy highlights initial actions planned to deliver our aims through to March 2022, underpinned by a longer-term detailed action plan. This will be reviewed annually with progress reported. As part of this new strategy, we have reviewed and refreshed our customer charter, which we've renamed our customer contract. The contract includes our commitment to customers and the service standards they can expect when contacting the council. This report comes to Cabinet following a formal consultation regarding the draft aims of the strategy and proposed customer contract over the autumn. I therefore move recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 in the report.
Thank you, Richard. Is that seconded? I'm happy to. Eileen, thank you. Any questions or comments from Cabinet members? Eileen?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I really welcome this report. It's and obviously thank the officers that have worked on it. As Richard said, the residents are at the heart of everything that we do, and we always strive to ensure that they receive an outstanding level of service. The strategy builds on existing good practices, you know, developing services that are accessible to everyone. And it's just about making every single contact count. So it's a great report. It's reflected in the consultation that took place, which supported the strategy strongly, with 83% of respondents agreeing with it. So I think it's a great report, and thank you for it.
Thanks, Eileen. Any other comments still, Cabinet members, before I go to group leaders? No? Okay, in which case I'll go to Nigel first and then Bill.
Yeah, just a quick comment, really. I mean, is any work being done on trying to improve the response rate? Because it's less than 5%, and therefore the data that you get from these surveys becomes sort of, well, I'm not a statistician, but obviously, logically, the higher the rate of response, the more valid the data will be.
Thank you. And to Bill.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I very much welcome this report. I'm also heartened by what Richard said about, even though online is often the choice of most people, and online is certainly the most efficient way it can work in a council, that we still need to recognise that a significant number of people out there who, just from what Nigel probably would have said, probably didn't do the survey because they don't do online. So you don't get to know how they really always feel. And it is difficult, and I really appreciate this, how difficult it is to get their opinions into this system. But we do need to make sure that the old-fashioned methods are still there for those that need them, like a telephone and someone you can talk to. We don't always want web chat. I've had too much of that anyway. But I recognise that, and I'm glad you recognise that those people. We had the particular instance where the consultation, as laudable as it has been on the local plan, it has to be all online. It has to be put in a prescribed way. A lot of residents have spoken to me with their frustration of how to engage with that. I've had discussions with officers and David, and they have simplified it in some ways, which I do welcome. But it is still an obstacle for a lot of people, still online, and even when you make it more complicated. So I welcome this report, but we always need to bear in mind, what does the average person out there, can they cope with when we need to think about this? It's so easy to be in our bubble and go and do everything online. So thank you very much for this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Richard, do you want to come back on those 2 points?
You know, we always want lots of people to respond to surveys. We always want lots of people to respond to our surveys, but unfortunately, due to COVID, a lot of this, as Bill has said, has been pushed online, and also we've shared with partners and stakeholders I think I've got problems with networking.
No, I can hear. We can hear you. We can hear you, Richard. But give it brief.
Okay. Yeah, and so that is the issue. I mean, the pandemic has, of course, stopped us doing the ways we would normally do consultation. But hopefully, should the vaccine rollout be pushed forward and we can get people going back to some normality, any further consultations we do, well, of course, we'll have community centres used for those type of things as well. So that is an issue we have with the pandemic, Nigel. But I still think that the results that we had back show that people recognise that this council is doing all it can to try and be the first point of contact and deal with every contact that it has in. And as Bill says, as I've said, there are people who don't go online. There are people who there isn't something they want to do, and we have to make sure that we're still accessible to them.
Okay, thank you, Richard, and thank you for you and your teams for the work around this. It's a never-ending journey of improvement around this agenda, so that's good. It's been proposed, it's been seconded. Again, I'll take silence from Cabinet members as agreement. I think it's agreed. Thank you very much indeed. In which case, we'll now move to item 8, which is the resident survey of 2020. And this is Paul. So, Paul.
Thank you, Leader. As a cooperative council, we're committed to listening to and involving residents in developing our plans to protect, care and invest to create a better borough. The purpose of this Cabinet report is to report back on the results of the resident survey that was carried out between the 29th of July and the 4th of September 2020. It's the first resident survey we've completed in a number of years, so it's been a really useful exercise to do, as we've been able to get a much better sense of residents' views at this time, meaning we can take stock and use all the results as a baseline to move forward. The survey was borough-wide, with letters being sent out to every household to raise awareness and signpost people to the online survey. For those that didn't have a computer access, we provided a paper version on request. It was supported by regular postings on social media, and we asked for support from councillors, community groups and other partners to help us promote the survey in their local areas. In total, we received 5,473 responses, which is a great response. The aim of the survey was to capture views on issues that were topical and relevant to all residents and that would inform the delivery of the council's priorities, including COVID-19, the council's response to the pandemic, the borough as a place to live in, including local neighbourhoods, local centres, the town centre and the wider borough, climate change and volunteering. Within the report, we've set out a short summary against each of these themes, which include a you said and we did section under each to demonstrate what we're doing in response to the feedback. A full set of results are set out in Appendix 1, and overall it's a very positive result. These are some of the headline figures. 75% were satisfied with the council's response to COVID. 91% agreed they were well informed about the support available to them. 92% felt they were kept well informed on advice and guidance. 71% agreed that the community support helpline was helpful. 78% were satisfied with their local neighbourhood as a place to live, and 82% were satisfied with the borough as overall as a place to live. The appendices provide a breakdown of some of the results by ward. In terms of moving forward, we want to broaden our approach to future engagement, and with reference to what was said in the last report, building on what we already do. So our proposals include engaging with a wider cross-section of people, including residents, customers and visitors, exploring new digital platforms we can use to modernise the way we do things, more real-time feedback via social media apps or SMS, for example, and relaunching the community panel using a more flexible and targeted approach. We had over 1,500 responses to the resident survey say that they would be interested in joining the new panel, which we're following up this month. I'd personally like to thank all the officers involved in this process, as we've asked them to complete this at a time when they've been extremely busy with dealing with our response to the pandemic. And I think the results of this survey highlight how well we as a council have done on that count. I move the 3 recommendations to the report, Leader.
The leaders have to just go. So, is there a second for those proposals?
Seconded, Richard.
Seconded. Carolyn, you wanted to say something?
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I think it's really good feedback that we've had from that survey, as well as, you know, a good take up, considering the things that you mentioned earlier, Richard, in relation to consultation. It's really difficult at the moment, isn't it? We can't go out into communities, we can't do things like street stalls to gather people's views. So getting that kind of return in these circumstances, I think is excellent. I think it also shows some of the things that I suppose linked to the previous discussion we had around budget, you know, that actually people feeling that this is a good place to live, valuing their neighbourhoods. As I said, those are things that the work that creates those good neighbourhoods often isn't statutory. It's not something we have to do, but we do it because we know that's what actually makes Telford and Wrekin a really great place to live, and it's what people value. I was particularly pleased to see the responses around climate change. Climate change isn't something that the local authority can solve on its own. We're a bit player in this, really. It obviously needs massive national and international action, but also individual action at a very local level. And I think seeing the level of concern from residents about climate change, seeing all of those suggestions that residents put forward that we have fed into the emerging borough-wide action plan that's being developed with a range of partners, and also people's expressing their individual actions, things that they've already done and intend to do in meeting this significant challenge. So I thought that was really, really helpful to understand where people are in relation to climate change and know that it matters to people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Does anybody else want to speak before I go over to the opposition leaders?
Oh.
No. Bill first.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I welcome this report. It's good to keep in touch with residents to see how they actually feel about us. I've got one particular question though. In the one that really intrigued me was the one on, do you know your ward member? And I just want to know how the ward member for Ironbridge managed to get such a high rating, please. Could they explain that?
Nigel.
Well, it wasn't me, I can tell you. But yeah, I mean, it's always useful to find out what the service users feel. So, as I say, my only concern is that, you know, it's a poor response rate. I appreciate the fact that it's the pandemic makes it difficult, but I do think that we ought to do some work to try and see how we can improve the response rate, because obviously then the data that comes out of it will be far more accurate.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, I'll take one dissent. The dissenters not been against. So that's been carried. So we move to the final item, which is the school funding formula. Shirley.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. The report you see before you today concerns the Dedicated Schools Grant, the DSG. It's allocated to local authorities by the Department for Education, and it's in 4 blocks: the schools, high needs, early years, and the central school services. The schools block is calculated using the number of pupils at the preceding October census, and therefore is different for each local authority. For 21-22, our allocation is 137 million. The high needs block uses a combination of historic allocations and a national funding formula. So for 21-22, ours is 28 million. The early years block, again, calculated taking average pupils in the relevant 2 January censuses and multiplying them by a unit of funding. Ours for 21-22 is 12 million. The Central School Services block, again, is calculated by a mixture of historic expenditure levels and number of pupils. The grant was introduced in 18-19 at a much reduced level, but our 21-22 allocation for Telford and Wrekin is £1 million. There continues to be concerns regarding the adequacy of the high needs funding allocations from the DFE. This is across the country. This was further exacerbated by the rise in age for support from 19 to 25 years. This, together with the increasing number of children and young people with high needs, is leading to all local authorities across the country struggling with insufficient funding. The DfE has responded with some additional funding allocation for local authorities, and whilst this is most welcome, it sadly does not meet the current funding pressures on high needs budget. It's still not really recognised after 10 years of government that there is a funding issue for all local authorities. Within Telford and Wrekin, a number of initiatives are in place to deliver the most cost-effective and efficient provision possible, but we are still experiencing similar difficulties to most other local authorities, with a fundamental pressure in what is a very demand-led service. The schools block funding allocation for local authorities is moving towards the national funding formula, which is benefiting Telford and Wrekin schools. During the 4 years 2017 to 18 to 21 to 22, the increase was around 6.8 per pupil. Now, whilst I truly welcome any increase in funding for our schools, this increase vindicates our long-held belief that the mainstream school funding for Telford and Wrekin had previously been held at an unacceptable low level by the Department of Education. We are therefore receiving this increase because of the chronic underfunding in previous years. So on the face of it, this appears to be very, very good news, and I am of course pleased for our schools, but it must be borne in mind, as I previously indicated, that provision was seriously underfunded. The DfE has also set a minimum funding requirement for local authorities per pupil, 4,480 for primary schools and 5,415 for secondary schools. This funding has an impact of boosting the funding for schools with less deprived intakes, as these schools receive very little funding from factors linked to deprivation and lower prior attainment. The local funding formula for 21-22 was discussed with the Schools Forum in October and again in November, and it was agreed that we will continue to move with the national funding formula. Allocation to schools is linked by an amount of growth funding. Our pupil numbers continue to grow as many families recognise Telford and Wrekin is an excellent place to live, work and raise a family. Our investment in the successful BSF programme, capital programme, has also prepared the way for our secondary growth. We have built capacity to absorb more pupils through completed buildings and schools designed to enable expansion where required. Our schools have agreed to raise their intake numbers, meeting the demand and providing all the school places required. We will continue to fund such schools using estimated pupil numbers, so our schools will not have to wait until the following determinant date, which is in April or September, for funding to reflect the increase in their pupil numbers. That is a very important factor for our schools. Nationally, it's using this historic data, which would not reflect the increase in pupil numbers that they are taking. As an administration, we are honouring our commitment to our schools, and we're ensuring they're actually getting it on the numbers they will be taking. So whilst it's noted the actual allocations to schools won't be finalised until it's once confirmed from the data in October 20 census, which is only released very, very recently from the DfE, Cabinet approval is being sought from the principles behind the local funding formula rather than the precise amounts for each school. I therefore recommend this report to Cabinet. I want to thank all our officers for their continued hard work, ensuring children across the borough will continue to receive the funding which we have protected by our schools benefiting from the use of the estimated pupil guarantee. This will prevent any year-on-year reduction in funding and offer more protection than being set nationally. And I also want to take this point to thank all our education staff that have been working through incredibly difficult circumstances during the last 9 months, putting all our families and their children at the heart of everything that they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Shirley. That's been proposed. Is that seconded? Thank you, Paul. I'll move it then to debate. As Shirley says, it's pretty much principle based rather than any particular allocations. We won't be getting into individual allocations to particular schools. That isn't a decision for the paper today. But Bill, I'll come to you and then to Nigel.
Thank you, Leader. I was waffling on before on the finance one and mentioned this because the principle in here is so important. This, over time, even though it still has imperfections in it, is trying to give a national base to all children so that wherever you go in the country, your standard of education should be guaranteed to be the same. And people may not be fully aware, the residents out there, that this money simply comes in and goes out to the schools on this national formula. In other words, council tax doesn't really play a part in this. It is being funded by the government. And as a funding formula to try and make it as fair and as best as it can. I particularly welcome that all the years of injustice that we've had, where we knew we were being underfunded, at least in the main now, are being rectified, and our schools have been crying out for this money for a long time, and we had no power to change it. So I really do welcome that this is now coming through to us. It's this funding formula I fear that the government should be using when it comes to children and adult social services, so that the services people receive are standardised throughout the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Nigel?
All right. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I mean, it's very good good news to see that we're now at the national, or around the national midpoint. And you know, sort of, I know that there's been arguments over several years about the funding for schools, but that's, you know, the government's listened and it's been rectified. So that's really good news, and it's nice to hear the cabinet member acknowledging that. I mean, you know, an extra 30 million over the last 4 years is nothing to be sneezed at. There's also an acknowledgement that that there's a growth in pupil numbers, which is good, which was denied at full council a couple of years ago. And so it's good to see also that the Building Schools for the Future programme has been mentioned, which is another legacy of the last Conservative administration. And thank you to my predecessor, Councillor Andrew Eade, and Councillor Steve Burrell, the cabinet member, because Telford Wrekin were one of only two authorities across the country who retained all their funding for Building Schools for the Future. So obviously our schools wouldn't be in the state that they are now if that funding hadn't been guaranteed, and we wouldn't have had the capacity to increase the school numbers that's actually required. I have got one question on behalf of Councillor Veronica Fletcher, who, and I'm quite happy to have a written answer on this, as to how much money has been allocated to SACRE, because she was questioning me on that, and I can't see anything in the report. So perhaps you could let me know on that one. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. I mean, honestly, Nigel, I mean, I know we're just outside of the season of goodwill and stuff, but I can't allow those comments to go unchallenged. I mean, firstly, it was a Labour government, the last Labour government, that came up with the Building Schools for the Future programme. It was a Conservative government. I've got to say, Bill, sorry, supported by the Liberal Democrats, who slashed Building Schools for the Future programme here in Telford and Wrekin as well. It removed the Building Schools for the Future programme from other areas of the country. I mean, it's a bit like saying to a burglar, thank you for breaking into my house, and can I just say thanks for not taking all of my stuff, like you did, like you did with my next door neighbour. I mean, it's absolutely beyond belief, Nigel. I mean, I see you smiling off camera. I mean, it was how you could spin the Building Schools for the Future project as a Conservative project, and say that it was not cut here in Telford and Wrekin is beyond belief. I mean, I thought we'd moved on a little bit from the Andrew Reid style of opposition, Nigel. But we're all smiling because of we'll take it the seriousness that it deserves. And also, can I just thank you, Nigel, for finally acknowledging, after much scaremongering, that we no longer have a school place issue in this borough, because you've just said that thanks to BSF, there is that BSF provided the school places for the future. Well, only a few years ago, you were banging on wrongly that we had a problem with school places. I'm glad that we've now resolved that today. But anyway, I'll go to Shirley to answer. I'll go to Shirley for the particular detailed reply. But thanks for cheering me up, Nigel.
Thank you for that, Leader. You've just picked up on the one thing that I've actually written down. I did not deny a growth in numbers, as has been said by Councillor Doug Moore. If he'd like to go back and check the minutes, I think the denial, and it wasn't a denial, it was a fact, we did not have an insufficiency in school places. That was the discussion that happened in the chamber. It was not denying that our borough is growing, because families want to come here, and rightly so, when we've got an outstanding children's services and we have got fantastic schools, and every single school within our borough has either been rebuilt or refurbished under our administration. So that is why families want to come and live here, and I will not defend the fact that our numbers are growing. That is fine, but what we did defend, and I will continue to defend, is we have the capacity for our families to have a school place, and that is what the discussion was, if you would like to check on it, and I will definitely come back to you on that. And as you know, we are going through a £37 million expansion programme to ensure our children continue to receive excellent education in outstanding school buildings. To go back to your comment for Veronica Fletcher, though, I will answer that. I won't need to come back to you with a letter. We're talking about here the school funding formula, which is nothing to do with SACRA, so I wouldn't be able to give you the figures from there. I can confirm to you we will continue to provide the officer time to SACRA like we always have done. It will not be cut. But as I said to you when I was reading my report, and I was quite specific about that, there are no details for any funding for any schools. That detail is not within this report. So I would not be able to give figures back to Councillor Fletcher on SACRA, because that is not a defined school part of school funding. But I can confirm to you that that is still being honoured and the officer time is still there. If Veronica Fletcher needs any further detail, please ask her to write to me and I will confirm back to her whatever it is that she needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's been moved and it's been seconded. Again, I'll take silence as agreement. Thank you very much. We did, my very able deputy did take over me when I lost connection, but he chaired the meeting very well, but he then missed an agenda item, so I'll go back to that one. Which is the employee survey. Ray Evans.
Oh, well, in my good friend's defence, it wasn't on the list that's in the calendar, so well done. Okay, the Cabinet will be aware that within our business plan is an aspiration for the Council to be recognised as an employer of choice with a workforce that is empowered, skilled, diverse and responsive, and proud to work for the Council. As a cooperative council, involvement and respect are amongst our core values, and this includes our staff, who we value highly. So in order to find out how they were doing and what we could do better, a staff survey was undertaken last autumn to explore the employees' experience of working for this council. As this was the first employee survey for some time, special efforts were made to encourage all employees to respond. Overall, the results of the survey were very positive. Employees demonstrated their commitment to the priorities of the organisation, good working relationships within teams were obvious, trust in managers, and there was an overall positive experience of working from home during the pandemic. People felt that the council was a great place to work. A summary of the outcomes by theme is provided in the report, and I won't take up time with that, but if I may, I'll take a moment just to use a few quotes that were received. One person said, "I've been working for Telford Wrekin Council for 11 years, and I can't imagine working for anyone else. I've been well treated throughout, and I've been given opportunities for development and progress in my career." Another said, "I talk with great honour to people about my team, what we do and how good we are." And finally, somebody said, "Telford Wrekin is a great employer for me. I feel supported and encouraged." Based on the findings of the survey, particularly the questions that scored lower levels of response, an employee survey action plan will now be developed and shared with representative employee groups as part of our approach to continuous improvement. A completed action plan will be delivered by October, within 1 year of the survey being completed, and the survey will be repeated again in autumn 2022 to enable the organisation to track employees' views on working for the organisation and to drive a continuous improvement as an employer of choice. Cabinet, can I just also take this opportunity to say thank you to all of our staff at this time. I'm glad we're doing a good job for you as an employer, and with your help, we can be even better. It's recommended that Cabinet note the headline findings of the employee survey, approves the proposed approaches to developing and delivering the employee survey action plan and associated timetable for delivery.
Thank you very much, Ray. I think you speak on behalf of us all in your words about our staff. That's been proposed, it's been seconded. Well, forgive me, has it been seconded, Richard?
I'll second it. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or debate?
Can I just add, Sean, in seconding it, that
of course,
you know, it's great to see the feedback in the survey of people who believe that they've got a great job working for the council, but we must also express our thanks and gratitude to them for how they've dealt with in the pandemic and how they were on the front line delivering those services and getting out there, supporting both the distribution of meals for children, etc. They stood up in the face of while other people were in lockdown, and we must appreciate them, because the resident survey we had earlier shows that the residents appreciated the work we did. So we should put our thanks into them, because the attitude they had in delivering the services shows in their survey that they enjoy working for us, and that's why they had the responsibility and the power to step up, because they felt appreciated. So they then pass that appreciation on by doing different jobs in that time of need.
Thank you, Richard. Eileen?
Thank you, Leader. Richard did kind of steal the words from my mouth there. But yeah, it was just really to say a massive thank you to all of the staff. I'm glad that they do feel valued, because I couldn't be prouder of the team that we've got at Telford Wrekin Council, especially over the last few months. They've worked so hard, and you know, I just thank them from the bottom of my heart. I know that we all do.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Nigel?
Yeah, basically, yeah, just to endorse everything that Richard said and what Eileen said. You know, it's been fantastic. You know, the staff have been fantastic, and I'm sure that every resident in Telford and Wrekin is very appreciative of what they do.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say, from my perspective as well, that we can't do anything as a council or as an administration without our staff, and they are absolutely fantastic. I want to associate myself with all the words that's been mentioned, and I also want to say a big thank you to them publicly, as we all often do privately in our dealings with them. I'm not being party political, but I do think it is important to note that, you know, thanks and appreciation for public sector workers is important, but so is recognising them through their terms and conditions. I do note that there's a call for us to go back onto the streets on a Thursday evening to clap our NHS front workers and our key workers and our social care staff. Absolutely, we should be doing that, but we also should be rewarding them with pay rises so they don't have real term pay cuts. It's beyond me how we can be in a situation where soldiers, firefighters, police officers, local government officers are facing a pay cut in real terms after this pandemic, and I do hope the government U-turn on that proposal. Well, it's been a good meeting. Thank you very much indeed. It's been moved and seconded. I'll take silence as agreement, and I'll call this meeting to an end. Thank you very much.